with your military service, kind of tell me how you got involved and what prompted you to join.
What prompted me to join the military, I actually wanted to do federal law enforcement originally. So I had actually trained from the time I was about 14 for this resume. So I got into martial arts. I got my EMT certification when I was 16. I ran ambulance for a couple years. I got into search and rescue.
That's really young.
So I know. Well, trust me, when you're that young and you start seeing some of those real life situations, it definitely makes you grow up a little faster.
Yeah.
So basically I prepared myself from the time I was 14 until, the time I actually entered the service to do federal law enforcement, and military police made sense. So I knew I wanted to go into the military. Obviously, being a police officer was a great start, and just kind of building on my career from there. And obviously, that didn't happen. But I had a lot of great memories and some really great experiences along the way.
Right. So, can you kind of talk about the things that you did while you were in service in the military?
So for the most part, I was a reservist, but I did do a deployment, and that deployment was specifically for security detail for 4-star General Abrams. Okay. So we were deployed about 2 months after the 9/11 attack. I was specifically brought down to Fort Monroe, Virginia, where it's a trade outpost, so there's lots of colonels and generals and lots of higher ranking officials on post. Our detail was to secure the post. Obviously, there's a lot of information going back and forth from the White House to this post, and 4-star General Abrams was one of our security details, which I eventually got assigned to. So my main job was basically to take him from his house to the helicopter pad and back, and just kind of do general security for him, on post. I mean, the post was very secure itself. Actually had a moat. It's one of the oldest posts in the United States.
Oh my gosh.
I had a moat. And we were the unit, or specifically my platoon in the unit, that's what we did. We were there with an infantry platoon as well. And we made sure that all that information and all those, high-ranking officials were safe.
How long did you do that?
It was about a year. Yep. So we got deployed. So what was interesting was that I was trained to be a field MP, which means we were all trained to do guard POW camps. So we dug foxholes, and it was basically the closest I can get to infantry being a woman. So it was a lot of combat readiness. And then we went down to Fort Monroe, and we had to be trained garrison, which is, the cops that write the tickets and, arrest people and all that good stuff. So it was interesting because we had to go through training again, being pepper sprayed, being tasered and all that good stuff. So
what was that like?
I didn't like it. It wasn't something I asked for to happen again. But it was a lot of fun because that training really did kind of help me get a more perspective of what law enforcement would be like outside, whether in a federal environment or whether civilian. So unfortunately, during that deployment, I shattered my ankle. So I wasn't able to really do much after that because I was not, my ankle wasn't mobile. The military wanted to do all sorts of stuff to it. They wanted to, put cadaver parts in me and So I was like, I'm just going to go to a civilian doctor and see what they say. So he washed out some bone fragments, and it's been good ever since. So I'm glad that. What's that?
How did you shatter your ankle?
Oh, it's really nothing exciting. I was running around the top of the moat and stepped in a groundhog hole. Oh. My foot stayed, and the rest of me was still running. So it was a longer run. I think it was like a 6 or 7 mile run, and I did that around the 5th mile, and I was already almost there, and I didn't realize the damage of my ankle. So I just was like, "No, it's okay." And I'm like,
you kept going?
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna get to the finish line, and I'm looking at the finish line, and I'm like, I can't do it, So a golf cart came up beside me, and I was like, no. I was like, all right, just let me hold on to the golf cart. I'm gonna make it past the finish line.
Wow.
so I drug my leg behind me. I thought it was sprained. I didn't think it was broken. So when they took me in for X-rays, They were like, oh yeah, it's kind of
Probably shouldn't have done that last part of the race.
So they gave me a boot to wear for a while, and so I was named RoboCop. Yep.
Awesome.
Yep, and sounds came with it and everything else. It was great. Every time I passed, one of my fellow soldiers, I had robotic sounds.
Nice.
So yeah, that lack of mobility kind of didn't enable me to go on to do further things in the military, which was unfortunate. But I did get to come home and be with my son. So that was the hardest part of the deployment. Obviously, he was 14 months old. I gave him over to my parents. So that was very emotional. And he was just starting to kind of talk and kind of really be aware of that unconditional love. And it was a very hard thing to do. So when that happened, I was really upset about the loss of my career, but I was also happy that I was able to get home to him and, continue to be a mom. So, I've often thought, like, what if I could have, fulfilled all of that and went through, but I'm happy. I'm happy being a mom, and I'm happy with what I've had, and I'm happy with the experiences and memories that I get to share with people. So,
and at one point, weren't you interested in being in the CIA?
I was, yeah. So that was part of the federal law enforcement dream. Like I was really interested in doing, either CIA or FBI. I studied a lot in high school, and I, got top marks, and like I said, I was very goal oriented. I, got into a lot of things that would have helped, give me a kind of a step up from other candidates. So that was my goal since I was 14, was to be able to do something like that. And,
What do you think it was that kind of drew you to that field?
I have no idea.
No?
Nope. It was just, I think it's just one of those things. Like my son, I always knew that he was going to be a soldier, and he always knew it from the time he was like 3. So I think it's a calling that, some people get at very young ages, which is great because then they're able to prepare, at a very young age to do what they want to do. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, but it was all great experiences, and I grew a lot through those experiences, and I wouldn't trade them for the world.
Do you have any particular memories that kind of stand out above any others about that time that you were deployed?
Mostly funny. So one particular memory that I like to share with people. So the Navy SEALs, they trained pretty much like a small island right across from our post. And there was kind of a lack of communication what their training was one evening. And they decided they were going to come up on shore on Fort Monroe. And Fort Monroe is like technically it's attached to the land, but it's almost an island itself. So you have beach all the way around it. And, we're patrolling the beaches in these cute little golf carts. And then all of a sudden we see these figures kind of rise up out of the water in the middle of the night. And of course, like,
yeah, you have no idea.
We didn't expect to see that, So we're calling all sorts of, we're calling the provost marshal, getting in backup to come in, and all of a sudden there's like 10 cop cars. We've got the civilian cops involved. There's weapons being pointed, and the Navy SEALs were just like, we're laying down our weapons. We're really sorry, and then we got it out of them that they were kind of doing a training that wasn't approved, but they thought it would be fun and didn't think that it was as, I'm like, well, it's kind of code orange right now, so anything coming out of the water with weapons is not going to be a good
heightened time for security, obviously. My gosh.
So yeah, that was probably the most intense moment on post, even though it wasn't an actual threat. But it was funny because then we sat around with the Navy SEALs and had funny and great conversations with them, and they were just like, this is a nice break, and we sat on the beach and laughed and had a good time and talked about their training, and so yeah, that was the most exciting story.
Were there a lot of women in your program?
Not a whole lot. I would say there was probably about 5 of us in the unit.
Compared to how many guys?
Ooh, I'm trying to think here. Probably about 240.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, a little outnumbered. Can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, I guess just what it was like being a woman in kind of what was a man's world.
It didn't really bother me. I guess because, I was an EMT at a young age, so plus I had a big brother who is a police officer, by the way. So he was also in law enforcement, and he's military. So growing up with him was like, kind of growing up in this boys' world where, and our family did not have a lot of money. So any toys that we had, we kind of, I would play with his toys, and obviously he didn't like to play with any of mine. But I mean, there was a lack of things to do because we didn't have the finances. This is the 28th house I've lived in. Yeah, so we moved around a lot as children.
Were they military, your family? No.
Well, it skipped a generation.
Okay.
Grandparents were both, but our parents were not.
Okay.
So Jaimie and I went on a lot of boy-type adventures when I was younger, and so having a career that was surrounded by men just didn't bother me. I didn't really think much about it, and they accepted me, just like kind of like one of the boys. And as long as you prove your worth and that you're as good as the skills that they have no problem with it, and they treat you equally. That's one thing about the military, is that it's a camaraderie, and it's not about gender, which, unfortunately in the civilian world, there's a lot of things about gender, and it comes out more in the civilian world than it actually does in the military, which surprises people. But
yeah, I am actually surprised to hear you say that, because I almost think it would be the opposite.
Right. So there's lots of controversy about women being on the front lines,
Right.
And you talk to most military men, they're like, well, as long as she can do what I can do, we're okay.
Wow.
So, they don't really have a problem because they serve with women. They know the strength of women, and we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and they're aware of that. Yeah. So, I never found all my brothers were great. They were great to me, even protective, at times. So, it's like you go out to a bar with your platoon, all guys, and they're like, somebody tries to approach me, and they're like, nope. There's like just having a bunch of big brothers. But yeah, it was, I made a lot of lifetime friendships out of it, both men and women. So I've served with a couple women that I'm still friends with today, and it's a great experience, yeah.
So once you got out of the military, so after you were done with that deployment and the ankle, that kind of ended the military career, what did you do when you came home?
So I had a couple different problems. I had 3 herniated discs, and I had my ankle issues. I had some shoulder issues because I'm very small framed. I know I'm 5'2.5". So, carrying 70 pounds of weight and, walking for 5 miles, it's eventually gonna, start pulling on just your frame, and it's gonna start causing issues. So I was aware of that fact, and I knew that I couldn't lead a huge active lifestyle. I knew that I wasn't able to, be a civilian police officer because I really wouldn't, the condition of my body, I really wouldn't have trusted myself to put myself or other people's lives on me. So I decided to get a desk job because it was stable. And I came out of the military as a single mom. Fortunately, all the money that I made was, I didn't have to spend it because they pay for pretty much everything, housing, food. So it's a great program in that sense where they're giving you money and giving you everything else. So it all went in the bank. I was able to buy a house. I was able to buy a car and provide a good life for my son. But I still needed a job. So I decided to go into billing, which eventually led into an accounting career and associate's degree in bookkeeping or accounting and business, and did that for the last 15 years. But I'm obviously trying to stay active where I can. My son and I, we enjoy mountain biking, and I still love going out in the woods and being with nature, camping. So So yeah, and then just recently I got into real estate because it was something that I really wanted to do when I came out of the military, was get into real estate. But you have to pay into the career. So, now it's the point where I'm able to pay into it a little bit and do what I really want to do.